welcome to all of you. Gabriella, I tried and yet still butchered your name.
You did your best.
For that.
No problem.
Here's where we're going to start, which is that I keep reading about the Hispanic vote. I keep reading about what Hispanics think. And lots of people who have these opinions and write these articles may or may not know what they're talking about. And so we have all of you here today to help us define first what we're talking about with Hispanics. And I want to start first. Julio, let me start with you.
Sure.
One fact from the Pew Hispanic Research Center that I liked was that in a recent poll, 51% of Hispanics don't particularly like that term, don't think of themselves as Hispanics. They think of them as themselves as coming from their country of origin. So it's one place where we've sort of started the conversation slightly off balance. So all of you are going to get a whack at this question, but Julio, why don't you start first with how should we be thinking about Hispanics as we have this political conversation?
I think we should be thinking about Hispanics, Latinos, whatever you want to call us, as American voters, as U.S. American voters, just like any other voter out there. We think that, you know, one of the things to me is as a, you know, I was born in Puerto Rico. I'm an American citizen. You know, I have both worlds. I live in both worlds. So I identify myself as a Puerto Rican, but I also identify myself as a, you know, Bostonian in the United States. I think we get into very dangerous territory when we start labeling and we start making these big, you know, generalizations about the U.S. Latino vote and about us being this monolithic group that kind of goes with the flow. And I just think that, you know, some people are going to identify themselves as Hispanics, some as Latinos, some as Cubans, some as Mexicanos, some as Puerto Ricans, Chicanos. It really doesn't matter. It's just the fact that there's 50 million of us out there, and we're here. So,
Bettina, 50 million, and you're here. So how should people think about Hispanic voters? Help us with this definition. No, sorry, that was to Bettina, Julio.
Yeah,
that's right.
No, I agree with Julio was saying in that we are American voters. I myself, I'm half Cuban, I'm half Mexican. I grew up in Miami, and my neighbor was Cuban, was Nicaraguan, Colombian. So understanding first the diversity with our own community is very important. And how you attract them is just recognizing that diversity. And, you know, Hispanic is such a broad term. You could be here for 6 generations and be Hispanic, or you could be a recent immigrant and be Hispanic. But it's having a conversation that respects the differences about these communities and engaging them and understanding, for many of us, we're bicultural. We have a foot in both worlds and we're bilingual, and having a message that resonates with that reality.
Frank, do you think that the conversation respects all of those differences, or do you think it all gets lumped together?
It does get lumped together, but it's useful to understand the Latino vote, even though Latino voters are very diverse. I mean, the Cuban voters in South Florida tend to be much more Republican than Mexican-American Democrats in California. So, you know, Puerto Ricans in the I-4 corridor in Florida are a huge swing vote, where, you know, Puerto Ricans in New York tend to be 90% Democratic. So, yeah, there is diversity. But look, I mean, the fact is that there is a backlash against Latinos in this country. I mean, we just had a Supreme Court case heard this week in which, under Arizona's law, the idea is that if you are reasonably suspect of being here without papers, the police can ask you for papers when they make a stop. Well, that's a pretty unifying experience for Latinos when suddenly you can be picked out because of the way you look or if you speak with an accent, even if you've been here 5 generations and you served in the, you know, honorably in the U.S. military for 5 generations. So I do think that the Latino vote, while it's simplistic and not well understood by outsiders, if you will, it is becoming a very significant voting group, and the question is whether what used to be known as a swing population, a swing vote, is becoming increasingly a base vote for Democrats because the Republican Party has lurched so far to the right. I think that's what is happening, but it's not irreversible. George W. Bush won over 40% of the Latino vote just a few years ago in 2004.
Before we get into the political conversation, which we will do at length, Isai, I wanted to ask you about something Frank said, a backlash against Hispanics. Do you think that's right?
Well, I think there's a degree of that, and there's been a degree of that. Every time that there's, you know, a need to, you know, divide and wedge the public, you know, we can always point to the immigrants, and I think we've suffered a degree of guilt by association. And that's what's happening here with this, with all these acts and these laws and proposals to curtail the sleeping giant that seems to be waking up. I do believe that it's there. I also believe that we can't overstate it too, because then we run the risk of losing credibility as well. If we overstate it and we make it seem like, oh my God, they're lining us all up, people are going to ignore it, and then when they do, and if they do, nobody will believe it.
I noticed we're joined, Jennifer Sevilla-Korn has joined us. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard the beginning here, but I was trying to get our hands around what we're talking about here when we talk about Hispanics, some of the misperceptions, some of the different ways in which we should talk about what is a voter group, but which also is made up of individuals and people from pretty different backgrounds. So I wonder, just jump in where you'd like to on this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and it's great to join such a distinguished panel. I think what we need to recognize is that Hispanics are not a monolithic group. I think that mantra needs to be shouted across the country. We all have very different experiences. My mother came here from Mexico and tells me this amazing story of her stepping in San Diego and seeing the American flag and teaching me what her experiences are. And somebody from Cuba, their family, it could be first generation, third generation. We all have very different experiences, and so what we need to focus on is the things that unite us. We all are Americans, and we need to talk about those issues that we care about, which is, by and large, jobs in the economy. That is a #1 issue, and when you're talking to Latinos this year, we're disproportionately have higher unemployment, and so that's what we need to focus on, those issues, and how can we empower Latinos to come together and be part of the conversation in America.
Gabrielle, I want to switch to you now as we slide into the more political conversation here. You work for the Obama campaign, and President Obama is doing quite well with Hispanics. He is ahead of Governor Romney by almost 40 points in some polls. Before we necessarily get to the head-to-head here, why does the president do so well among Hispanic voters?
Look, I think that everybody is absolutely right. We're a heterogeneous community, and we care about jobs, we care about health care, we care about the economy, and as Frank said, immigration is very personal for us. And the fact of the matter is that this election is about two people who have very different visions of the future of this country. The president is working to strengthen the middle class. He's working to build an economy in which hard work and responsibility pays off, and to build an America in which we're not divided, in which we're united. And Mitt Romney, has said he vetoed the DREAM Act. He's calling for all undocumented immigrants to self-deport. His immigration advisor is, the author of SB 1070, which, as Frank rightfully said, is an offensive law to Latinos. And his economic scheme is quite frankly familiar, and it's really troubling. He supports tax cuts that bust our budget for the very wealthy, fewer rules for Wall Street, and this is what got us into the economic mess that we're in right now. And it benefited very, very few, and disproportionately hurt the middle class and Hispanic families. So Hispanics know that the president is on their side. They know that he's fighting for comprehensive immigration reform and for the DREAM Act, and that's why we're seeing so much support for our candidates.
Well, Bettina, that's a lot to,
here we go. Here we go.
I don't even know where to start. There was so much misinformation in what you just said. This president
we
has
have a little time, so we'll try to unpack some.
This president has hurt the Hispanic community in so many ways. He's made so many promises, from not saying that he would pass immigration reform in his first year. 3 years later, we still don't have a proposal. He had super majorities in both chambers of commerce and didn't even give a proposal to the economy. Hispanics have been hurt the most by this economy. Record high unemployment, higher than national average, a record number of Hispanic children living in poverty. The principles and the policies of President Barack Obama have devastated Hispanic households. And what we have seen is one after another of these promises made to Latinos all across this country have been broken by this president. And the middle class, a lot of Hispanics are in the middle class, are hurting because of the economic principles pushed by this administration. So that's the reality. And she said that some things of Mitt Romney, who is our presumptive nominee. The Republicans in general we really support the immigrant population, and we support legal immigration. We've seen so many leaders within the Hispanic community rise to the top. The first Hispanic governor of Nevada, Hispanic, the first Latina governor of New Mexico, Hispanic Susana Martinez, Marco Rubio, all of the Hispanic members of Congress elected in the last elected in the last Congress in 2010, all Hispanic Republicans. That's a reflection of where this party is going, and you're going to see a lot more of that in the years to come.
Isai, the challenge for somebody like Mitt Romney, Isai, is to find a way to talk to Hispanic voters. He does start with this deficit. Now, you know something about talking to people in a winning way. What if you were given the task of talking to Hispanic voters by the Romney campaign to do something to make up this deficit that he has?
That's a good question.
That can't entirely be made up by just beating up on the incumbent president.
Well, it's funny. I call that Hispandering. I think that's the latest word. I didn't make it up, but I agree with it. The problem is that, with Romney, he says his grandparents or his father was born in Mexico. I'm surprised I'm not seeing him, in a photo op outside of a taco stand. It just feels like presidents will habla un poquito de español as a way to say, hey, I'm down with La Raza. But I'm in the middle on this one. Okay, I was looking forward to a lot more immigration reform from our current president. I supported him. The problem I'm finding is, who are they really working for? When Goldman Sachs is the #1 contributor for the Obama administration, is now probably going to be the #1 contributor to Romney's. It's like they'll tell you whatever you want to hear to get in office, and then they really follow the piper. Whoever got them there, whoever their interests. I think the American people. It's kind of like a reality show, where it's like The Bachelor, but on a presidential scale. I'll tell you what, El Novio, yes. Yo te amo.
Let me just wait, Jennifer. Let me ask you a question. Governor Romney, the presumptive Republican nominee, was out campaigning this week with Marco Rubio, the freshman senator from Florida, and there were a lot of claims made about what Rubio could do for Governor Romney's disposition within the Hispanic community. What's your guess on how that works, and whether Senator Rubio begins a conversation that helps the governor make his case to Hispanic voters?
Sure. I wanted to just address the laughter that I hear in the background. It's unfortunate, because we're talking about really serious issues, and for the Democrats to think that all Hispanics think the same way, and that, oh, we've got them in our pocket, so they're going to vote for us, they're not going to vote the other way, I think it's offensive. And I hear that laughter on the other side, sort of taking Hispanic community for granted. Oh, they're going to vote for us, because no way could they vote for a conservative. And so I find that, I'm talking, and so I find that a little bit offensive when there's a lot of laughter about the fact that any Hispanic could possibly vote for Romney or any other conservative. I worked for President Bush in 2004, and we absolutely went after the Hispanic vote. And the Republican Party and conservatives care about Hispanics and absolutely want to engage with Hispanics on all issues. So I just think it's unfair to laugh.
I was laughing. I was laughing.
I was laughing too.
Let's just hold on a moment. Let's just we can all enjoy laughter, and not necessarily have to be condemned for the most extreme position as a result of laughter. But Frank, you now have to answer for your laughter here.
Yeah, I was laughing, and when Bettina, who I have a lot of respect for, and Jenny, who we've worked with on immigration issues in the past, but when Bettina said that the Republican Party supports the immigrant community, I started laughing. Yeah. I mean, it is true that in the past there were brave Republicans who stood up for immigrants. That's not so much true now. The only break in the wall is Marco Rubio beginning to speak up very courageously. But the fact is that the presumptive nominee advocates a policy of self-deportation. What that means is he wants to purge the United States of 11 million undocumented immigrants by making life so miserable that they pick up and leave. That's not really a strong statement of support for the to the immigrant community. In fact, it's a radical proposal that was authored by the guy who wrote the Arizona and Alabama law, Romney's immigration advisor. This is a problem, and Bettina and Jenny know it. They have to speak up for the party, speak up for their leaders who are
Yes,
trying
and
to
we
change
are.
things.
We absolutely
But
are.
there's so much
Is that
incumbent information
the
there.
party has lurched, but
Hold
the
on,
party
this
has
is because-
lurched so far to the right. That's why Romney's down 40 points. Come on, let's
All
be
right.
And in
honest.
fact, John, John, I think two people have spoken, specifically, Bettina said about this, broken promise. Frank and I, were both there on the floor of the House when the DREAM Act, which is a sliver of comprehensive immigration reform, successfully passed because of Democratic majority support. And when Republicans, like Senator McCain, like Senator Hatch, who used to be with us on comprehensive immigration reform, stonewalled it, filibustered it, and didn't even allow it to come up for a vote. So it's quite disingenuous for people to blame only President Obama when Republicans who used to be with us and who used to be for comprehensive immigration reform, and even just the DREAM Act, which is this much of comprehensive immigration reform, stonewalled it.
Well,
The
I
president is
think
one man.
but Gabriella, there can be a continuum here, and I think what Esai was saying was that he's disappointed in both sides, and I think we've seen what President Obama can do when he cares about an issue. He can lead on it. He can speak forcefully and repeatedly about it, and I think it's a fair assessment of the president's tenure that he has not talked at length and extensively about.
John.
I would like to say,
Julio,
just in
hold on, let's get
2004,
Julio,
okay.
Sorry, let's let Julio chime in here.
Yeah, I actually have to side with Esai, and I think this is the problem. And just understand, first of all, that my company is sort of an independent media company that does satire and comedy and political commentary. So when I hear things about the fact that Mitt Romney, or I'm not trying to be offensive, but here's the thing that is really the key here, and I'm going to kind of talk to both sides of the aisle. A lot of Latinos voted for President Obama, and Esai and I are in that camp, and the idea of comprehensive immigration reform. It hasn't happened yet, and we can get into the inside baseball thing, but here's what's happened. What happened was that Latinos got very disillusioned, and remember Jorge Ramos calling the president out on the mat about 2 years ago, got very disillusioned with the fact that CIR, comprehensive immigration reform, didn't pass. So what happened? People started going to the options of a Mitt Romney, of a Rick Perry, of a Newt Gingrich, of a Herman Cain. The key here is that Governor Romney had the opportunity to take a more moderate stance, and he's the governor of my, he was the governor of my state, and he was a little bit more moderate than he is then than he is now. But the fact is, Rick Perry was more moderate, so Governor Romney tactically chose an extreme hardline stance on immigration, and he won the primary. He is definitely the nominee, and now he's trying to backtrack. And the reality is, he had his chance 6 months ago. So I really want to know from the 14% right now, because that's the poll, and I'm in the middle. I'm trying to look at both sides of the issue here, and we just produce we produce our commentary on both sides. We've called both the Dems and the Republicans out for the last year. But the question is, why did Governor Romney choose such an extreme position last year, and now why is he trying to backtrack? And then why are you saying that Obama's broken his promise? It's like saying, I'm a good drunk, but I'm a worse drunk.
Well,
I mean, you know what I'm saying?
No,
That's the question. That's the question that I have.
Julio, we don't have somebody here from the Romney campaign, but Bettina, you're going to have to stand in. And I just wanted to read you a quote from Marco Rubio on this point, and it gets a little bit at what Gabriella was saying. Rubio said, when you hear these anti-illegal immigration voices, they sound as if they are not just anti-illegal immigration. They sound like anti-immigration and anti-immigrant voices. The vast majority of Republicans don't talk that way. But unfortunately, all the voices that talk that way happen to be Republicans. Now, this is Marco Rubio. This is not some crazy left-wing liberal. There is obviously a challenge for Republicans. There's a challenge for the party's nominee. So let's all try to stop throwing shots at each other, and in that spirit, Bettina, what then will Governor Romney do to kind of improve the image problem that Marco Rubio says that Republicans have?
Right. And in that conversation that Marco Rubio was, you're quoting, and as I've seen him speak many times, he also said it's one small part that consists of Republicans, but there's also on the Democrats. But there's a lot more voices in the Republican Party that are supportive. We have Jeb Bush. We have Marco Rubio. We have Congressman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart. All these people who are supporters of Romney, who are serving in advisory boards to help him, all support immigration reform. But you know, we're talking so much immigration reform, and it's very important. And we talked a little bit about the DREAM Act. Marco Rubio has his DREAM Act. So if we just support the DREAM Act, I hope Obama is going to come out and endorse Marco Rubio's version of the DREAM Act. But the most important issue is the economy and jobs. And we want to talk so much about immigration, but the number one issue for the last 2 years for Hispanics has been the jobs and the economy. And it's no doubt because of this economic situation under this administration. So it's very important that we address what's the most personal issue for many Hispanic families. When you can't put food on the table and you can't figure out how you're going to help your kids and you can't figure out how you're going to pay your mortgage, that's very personal. That's very emotional. And we have to focus how we're going to make the lives of Hispanics, who many of them came to this country in search for the American dream, accomplish that American dream. And that's the best way, is having a good job so your children can have a better future. That should be the focus of this conversation. And that's what the Republicans and Governor Romney is going to propose, a different path, because the one we're on isn't working.
So in that case, Gabriela, it seems like Governor Romney's argument is basically the one he's making to all constituent groups. It's about the economy. I can handle it better.
I mean, I think that, you know, Frank and his colleagues have done some excellent polling on how immigration and how the tone of immigration and the policies that you propose affect the Hispanic vote. But I think that Bettina, you know, is absolutely right. You know, the economy, healthcare, education are all issues that Hispanics care about. And you have to remember that when the president took office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Now we've seen 25 straight months of private sector job growth. Hispanics have benefited greatly from this. In fact, in the past 25 months, the Hispanic unemployment rate has dropped 2.1%. Meanwhile, Mitt Romney is espousing the same economic policies that got us into this mess. He's taxing, he wants to, you know, reduce taxes for the rich, overburden the middle class. And so even on the economy, the extreme positions that Mitt Romney has taken would disproportionately hurt Hispanics. So I think the choice is clear. If they want to focus on the economy, we have a solid record of job creation. Hispanics, as I said, have gotten a lot of these jobs that we've created in the past 25 months. And he's fighting for an economy in which we all do our part, and everybody gets a fair shake at this.
Isa, I'm going to give you the same challenge I gave you about Governor Romney, but do it about President Obama. You're disappointed. Others have been disappointed. I want to see what advice would you give President Obama?
Wow. What advice would I give our president? You know, remember what you promised us. There were a lot of promises on the war. There were a lot of promises on cleaning up the malfeasance on Wall Street, immigration reform, obviously. You know, I would just say be true to yourself, because every time you don't, you give the opposition a lot of ammunition to say, you know, where's that change that was promised? It's very weird. You know, I would have books behind me, but I'm anticipating this ban hitting California any minute now. You know, I think humor, you know, he's very smart in reaching out to the people. You know, what the Republicans criticize him over, you know, going on talk shows and comedy shows and this and that. You know, he connects with people on a personal level. There are other folks that, you know, that's not enough. And I think that's, you know, he's got to be more substantive in following through on his campaign promises, because I see both of them doing the same thing. They'll tell you what you want to hear until they get in office, and then they don't hear you.
John, here's what I don't understand. I'm sorry, John. I don't understand one thing. So in 2008, the #1 Hispanic voter priority, we have to remember, was health care. Because of the President's Affordable Care Act, 9 million Hispanics who previously did not have health insurance are going to be able to have it. Right?
Can I comment on that real quick? Can I just say real quick? And I love you. You know, it's a Trojan horse. I mean, I look at the extreme right, and they have, when the extreme right and the extreme left keep going, they converge. That's what I've noticed. This healthcare, I mean, I don't want to pay for something when I'm taking care of myself. There are a lot of people who believe in you pull yourself up by the bootstraps. There are so many draconian or weird things in that health bill. It was so large. It was so hard to digest. So it was like a popularity contest. I was for it until I realized now there are certain aspects of it that are not that good. What are we giving up in order to have, quote unquote, mandatory coverage? What are we truly giving up? Are we really helping the American people be healthier? And why don't we go after a lot of these corporations that literally feed off of our ignorance? Let's look at a company like Monsanto. Has a lot of problems, but what does Obama do? He appoints Michael Taylor, who used to be their chief lobbyist. And, FDA, I mean, so many government agencies could use overhauling where they could really be called to task, about whose interest do you represent. It's all like corporatism now. Everything, whether it's Goldman Sachs in the Treasury Department, I mean, rehiring Geithner and all the people that supposedly were responsible for creating the mess. So I support Obama in principle. I just look at his actions and I go, wow, it really hurts me.
Yeah. Frank, you weigh in here on that question.
Look, I'm one of those Democrats who has been deeply disappointed in Obama during his first term. And when it comes to the issue that I work on affecting immigrants, I think the criticism of that, he hasn't been that into immigrants has been true. But,
You mean, are you saying he's just not that into you?
Exactly. But on the other hand, he's not that into immigrants, but the other guy wants to drive them all out of the country.
Exactly.
Once it becomes a choice, it's like Obama's like, okay, I wish he had more of a backbone. I wish he would fight harder.
I wish he voted more.
At least he's trying to legalize people rather than to criminalize and drive them out. So,
well, I'm not sure about that, Frank, because this president has the highest rate of deportations of any president in the history of the United States, and he also has not addressed immigration. I just have to say this. Frank was there at the table with me in 06 and 07 when we had a president who was committed. When you say committed, there's actions behind it to immigration reform. You had President Bush giving a speech from the Oval Office on immigration. You had him sending his secretaries to the Hill to help formulate legislation. You had him out on the stump and putting together coalitions.
All true.
We tried to work with this president, and I was with Frank at the first 2 years of President Obama's, because I didn't care if it was a Republican or a Democrat. We have an immigration system that is broken, and I don't care who passes it. And he absolutely was not committed to it.
Well, I think most people agree.
I have one more thing to say, just one more thing to say. He had a veto-proof Congress. The first 2 years, he could have shoved it through if he wanted to, like healthcare, and he didn't do it.
Well, that's dangerous.
That's not commitment. That's not commitment.
Julio, you get the last word on this, and then I'm going to have a final question for all of you.
A couple of things that we should keep in mind. I agree with Frank. I am disappointed in President Obama. As an American citizen, I agree with a lot of what Isai is saying. Two things that I just want to point out. One, from the Republican side, the Reverend Sam Rodriguez, who had asked for an anti-immigration rhetoric pledge last year, he's one of the largest Hispanic evangelicals in the country, had sent out a pledge to all the Republican candidates to say, I will sign a pledge to tone down the immigration rhetoric. No one signed it. Governor Romney, I'm sorry, he has already chosen he has made his draft picks, like we said, and his draft picks are Chris Kobach and Fair and Cap, whatever the California group is, and it's exactly the point here. The point is, yes, President Obama has broken his promise. We know that, but the option is even worse, and I think a lot of Latino voters are seeing that, and that is why Governor Romney is 40, 50, we are the 14%. And when will the Republican, campaign or Governor Romney's campaign make the tactical point to gain, the 40% that even your own Republican strategists, like Ana Navarro said, former Huntsman's co-chair of the campaign, said that if you don't get 40%, you're not going to win the White House.
Well,
I'll tell you when.
He has a chance.
I'll tell you when, real quick.
Go ahead.
All right, go ahead. when their domestic help starts costing a lot more, that's when I think it'll really, because that's really a lot of right wingers that support immigration are out there because they want to help Julia keep her kids or stay in the country because they get such a good deal on labor.
All right.
I think
Well,
that's a completely unfair point. That's just
Maybe.
that's unfair. And I just, there's a lot of caring, wonderful, compassionate conservatives who absolutely love immigration. This nation is a nation of immigrants, and we want.
Where are they? Where are they when there's a
What are you
presidential
talking about?
candidate who says that
I'm right
we
here.
electrify
I'm right
events?
here.
Where are they?
Oh my God!
Senator Marco
Where are
Rubio,
they?
you just named some people who support Romney. Talk about Senator Marco Rubio. Who wants to put a conservative alternative to this.
Speak out
Marco
against
Rubio,
Kobach.
Ileana
Speak out against
Ravaloman.
Kobach.
So yes.
Yeah, but
all right, everyone, we're gonna actually, I'm gonna just kind of pull this to a halt here. And the very last question I want to ask you about, because we didn't quite get a chance to touch on it in the political realm anyway. Marco Rubio is talked about at so much that I just want to get quickly from each of you an answer to this question. And Bettina, I'll start with you, which is that if Marco Rubio were to join Governor Romney on the ticket, I want some sense of you from either it will help a great deal with Hispanic voters, it won't help at all, or it'll be a wash. Give me some sense, because this is talked about so much in terms of his help with this community, and all of you have a better sense of it than we do. Bettina, start with you. What effect would a Rubio candidacy have? Quick answers. I'm going to go right through with all of you.
I am excited about the amount of Hispanic Republicans in this party, and you're going to see a lot of them as serving as surrogates. And Marco Rubio, either as vice president or as a great surrogate, is going to help the Republican Party, like many other Hispanic Republican surrogates, talking about the reality of this economic situation and how Republicans can improve the economy and the lives of Hispanic Americans.
Isai?
I think it'll help in Florida. I think it'll help in with the Cuban American community, which is really what I would think the only really respected by the political establishment community of the Latinos, because they're extremely well financed and organized. Even though Mexican Americans make the largest contingent, and then Puerto Ricans far behind. I think it'll help with that. I think he's a moderate voice. I think he's a good guy, but he's also admired by a lot of the, I guess the rhetoric of the right, and it's not going to make me go that way. I'm independent now because I really see these two political parties as two sides of the same coin. It's whatever corporations pay each one of them, that's who they're going to have to listen to. Whoever wherever the real power is whose interests they're going to serve.
Frank, Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I think he'd help. I agree with that side. I think he'd help in Florida. Wouldn't help much with other Latinos. But I think this Rubio initiative, his version of the DREAM Act that he's doing, honestly, I think I think he's already calculated that Romney's going to lose in 2012, that Romney's going to lose the Latino vote big, and what Marco Rubio is doing is getting ready for the day after the election for the next 4 years to try to repair the Republican brand with Latinos, and I wish him Godspeed in that effort.
Jennifer?
Yep.
I think that Senator Rubio would be a great pick for vice president. I think that if you see he's a senator, he's still an amazing voice. He talks about the American dream in a way that is just refreshing, and he is putting ideas on the table in Congress that are also new and common sense solutions that I think we could all agree on. And so whether he's VP or senator, I think he's just great for the brand, and I think he's great for Hispanics.
Julio?
I'm just going to speak specifically to the I-4 Puerto Rican vote, since it's a big one in Orlando. I don't think Senator Rubio is going to make a lot of difference in Florida, and I do think that the Puerto Rican vote is going to be pretty substantial, in the same way that Governor Luis Fortuño is really not going to make a difference as well, who's a surrogate of another Latino Republican who has double-digit inflation, unemployment on the island. So I think the RNC needs to be really careful when it starts to specifically start looking at candidates, specifically, and I'm just speaking as a Puerto Rican voter in Boston and in Orlando. Just don't promote Governor Fortuño or Senator Rubio. That's just what I'm asking as a Puerto Rican voter.
Gabriela, last word to you on Marco Rubio.
Look, I think that this election, regardless of who's in the number 2 slot, is about the number 1 slot and two completely competing visions of our country. We have a president who's fighting for the middle class, to strengthen the middle class, to make sure that we have an economy in which hard work is rewarded. And we have Mitt Romney, whose economic scheme is really familiar. It caused the crash of our economy and penalized and punished the middle class. So I think that's what this election is about, regardless of who the vice president is.
Okay, all right, Gabriella. Thanks, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. And be sure to tune in to Sunday's Face the Nation to see highlights from this hangout. Bob Schieffer will be joined by Governor Haley Barbour, Los Angeles Mayor Antonia Villaraigosa, and California Governor Jerry Brown. Plus, we'll talk to a panel about the state of the war on terror 1 year after bin Laden's death.